Welcome, Scaling Up, our enterprise launch. Today will be a case study of BIM 360 to the Autodesk Construction Cloud. I'm one of your main presenters, Lauren Collier, SSOE Group's Director of Project Technology. Co-presenting with me today is Mark LaBelle. He's been a colleague of mine for the last 15 years at SSOE Group, and he's our Innovation Technology Leader. Today, we are sharing our story. It'll be an intimate reflection of the efforts and the learning and resources for our enterprise conversion and how it played a keystone in our project delivery and data strategy at SSOE. So a little bit about SSOE. We're a global architecture and engineering firm with construction management, and our mission is really to deliver unparalleled client value and advance the AEC industry. Our vision is to design and build the future for our clients, colleagues, and communities. This vision and mission is interwoven throughout this digital initiative and our presentation today. When you conclude this session, we are confident that you will walk away with several insights and ideas for your companies, but also we wanted to highlight a few of the key learning objectives. We feel that you will have insights for an enterprise launch of BIM 360 and how we upgraded to the Autodesk Construction Cloud. You will learn from our implementation examples about the effort and planning that is required for a full company adoption. You'll also learn why upgrading to Autodesk Construction Cloud pretty much less than a year later after our enterprise BIM 360 launch was a critical point for us to have not only project success, but also to continue our digital transformation and our vision here at SSOE. And you will learn about improving your company's digitization journey, which we are all on, into construction technology adoption. So, what do our numbers look like?
So to talk about the numbers a little bit, here are our statistics as of August 22nd of 2022. We have 2,312 projects that we've created through our automation engine that is directly connected to our enterprise resource planning, our ERP environment. That is the environment that has all of our clients, our project numbers, project names, PM data, a lot of other financials. I mean, that is the back end that runs most of your organization's systems. That data is synchronized to our SSOE data lake, which is held in Microsoft's Azure technologies. And as you can see here, here's a few highlights. When we went active in BIM 360, we started with test projects in the next generation platform. So that was our start date. We were through a beta process all the way through December of 2020. We have 1,933 projects that go over that time period. All of our projects went live in BIM 360. So that's all data, not just Revit, not just field checklists, it's everything on January 1st of 2021. And as you can see as the last note, we are starting to do the sunsetting of those projects with our ACC rollout that we'll talk a lot more about later. Currently, we have 379 projects that are active in the Autodesk Construction Cloud. Our test project cycle started in July of last year, so we were very early on the adoption curve. And that test project cycle went all the way through May of 2022. The go live date for all projects, again, all new projects, that's a brand new project starting at SSOE, was May 31st, 2022. Also, you'll see that we have 1,202 internal users. These accounts are created automatically from the date of hire and synchronized to our Project Office 365 email groups that we use for email correspondence back and forth, whether it's internally or externally. And then we also have statistically 2,492 external users. And these users are our clients, our collaborators from outside companies, and we're controlling these via external roles and templates. Next slide, please. So before we go into the how We do want to talk a little bit about the history of SSOE over the last 5 years and how we got to the decision of why BIM 360 in the first place. So again, we were in the early stages in 2017 of researching the BIM 360 platform. We participated in the next generation beta testing environments before they went live. So we were, partially using classic field and glue, not a lot, but we had a high interest of what they were doing with the next generation platform and trying to create a common data environment. We worked with our progressive project teams, let's call it our technology early adopters within the organization, to really start looking at how does this help us with Revit server replacement. We use that Revit server ecosystem for quite a long time. It worked well for a company like SSOE that's spread across the world, but we already saw the writing on the wall that it was going away. So that period in 2017, we were using it really just to kind of get our footing and understanding of what it's going to do for us. By 2018, we were already starting to develop an organization-wide plan. We'll talk a little bit more detail about some of these points, but we went through a data mapping exercise to find out where everything was and how we were trying to connect it in a very manual sense. Then we went through the process of education of executive management presentations. We had them go to AU, various conferences, start benchmarking clients or companies like SSOE. And we had a full strategy at the time we got to, let's call it mid 2019, that we were going to rip out the entire stack of tools and systems at SSOE. So that's our finance system, our HR system, our SharePoint, project delivery. Everything's going to get overhauled if we're trying to build and improve, as Lauren had mentioned, the AEC industry. We're not going to do it with legacy tools. So then we had to go through and get our operations teams. These are the people that are working on our projects with our clients to achieve their goals. So it's not just a corporate initiative. Everybody has to be bought in. So in 2021, we went live, as mentioned in a few previous slides, BIM 360, all new projects, January 1st, 2021. We had to create a program prior to that phase one, really, where we were talking with staff on how to make sure that they had training no matter what role you surfaced on a project, whether you were processing submittals, you were doing design, you were doing engineering calcs, we had to have training identified. We set up roundtables, also known as therapy sessions, early on, because there is a lot of therapy that has to go when you're sunsetting an old platform and how you've used it for 15 plus years. So we had to have those sessions just to go through how it's different. But also getting progression, we set up communities of practice to be able to build on best practices and celebrate some of the wins of using the new tools. Also in phase one, we had to do a lot of migration, right? There's projects that are still out there in the old systems, but we have to work with the project teams on when do we migrate to the new system? Is it a certain phase of a project? Is it everything? So that was something that we went through in phase one. And then in 2022, we went live. I mean, we already had ripped out and planned for the past 4 years, BIM 360. And by 2022, phase two is already in place and we're starting ACC live for all new projects. So we had to go through a full cycle of training differences, revising that, implementing more data and automations to streamline the accessibility as well as the employee availability. And then we already are going through refinements of our quality procedures, right? It's kind of that plan, do, check, act. Next slide, please.
So Mark talked about that planning and the history. One of the really important components in the planning was we had to do a current state analysis. And I really can't emphasize this enough. This is a graphic demonstrating the output of one of our just data analysis. So where was our data? Our files, our models, our meeting minutes, our point clouds, our financial data. It was everywhere. And in every flavor, based on client, based on office location, based on business unit, based on market sector. And in 2017 and 2018, we already had an immense need for more transparent project collaboration, but there was no clear system or systems that allowed for our BIM environment to interact with our drawing environment, to interact with our project management environment. And we had to make an investment. We could not sustain this current on-premise architecture with a hint of cloud. We were starting to introduce cloud environments, but for the most part, we were 90%, on-prem. And it was difficult. We made it work. We had several complex systems in our infrastructure team pushing and pulling data back and forth, but it was resource intensive. So SSOE created this digital strategy. This was part of our digital transformation process. During the same time, we also transitioned CEOs, and we launched our new 2025 technology vision. And at the top of that vision really was around 50% increase in efficiency. And we weren't just going to do this through ripping out our technology systems and our infrastructure. Yes, the infrastructure, the hardware, the software, public, private, cloud, on-prem, that played a big role in it, but the people and the processes also played just as much of a role. So we really heavily invested in simplifying our platforms. We created our project technology roadmap, and really this roadmap was our operations investment in technology improvements that were focused either on key clients or key initiatives. And they worked very closely with my team and with Mark. And, we incrementally continued to chip away at this 50% efficiency. And we're halfway there. And a lot of that had to do with understanding the current state, being aggressive in our strategy, putting together that change management and continuous improvement mentality, really leaning on our lean project delivery backbone, and asking the company to be agile. Oh, and by the way, the pandemic happened during all of this. But the great thing is we had already pre-pandemic had already set the foundation for this launch. If anything, maybe the pandemic was a blessing, in surprise. I know it has affected, a lot of us, but in one way, it did force us to go from 26 offices to 1,200 offices. And how do we not lose efficiency and gain accessibility all at the same time? So our North Star was really about that, leveraging cloud-based solutions, simplifying our infrastructure stack, and finding innovative ways to connect our data and our models and our clients. And so this is what these are the tools that we're using in the design space, in the business space, in the collaboration and communication space. And you can see here, it's pretty heavy in two main providers. We made an investment in Autodesk. We made an investment in Microsoft. And our main reasons for that were the scalability, the security, the performance, and the partnership. So the plan. Mark, take us into the planning side of the story, and let's dig into the resources and the work that set the stage for our BIM 360 and ACC launch.
All right, well, thanks, Lauren. So first, of course, we have to assemble the A team. Be able to break down what is necessary for a full enterprise. This can't be driven from an enterprise or an executive management team only. It can't be driven from a technologist mindset only, or anyone particular person, but it is a team approach, right? Team stands for together, everyone achieves more. So when we looked at building a core team across our organization, we had to have at least an engineer or architect and a project manager, because these are the individuals that are working with our clients, getting projects done, delivering our projects. They have a history of that project delivery in the core of what they do every day. And we had to have at least one of each of those individuals from each major business unit on the core team to represent and speak up on how this may or may not work or impact their business. We set up weekly meetings in 2022, and I would say this actually happened. It was supposed to happen earlier in 2022, but the pandemic did delay because we were still trying to figure out as an organization how to work from March through really May. But by June, we started this up. So we only delayed by 2 months just because we still had a business to run and trying to, like Lauren mentioned, go from 26 offices to 1,200. But we still met that schedule. We had weekly meetings. We still kept that date of January 1, 2021. And this core team was really the kind of the sounding board to make sure that our A3, which was our guiding principle, that's where we built a lean project plan, and we established our conditions of satisfaction as our commitments, budget, and final buy off. That's what the core team was to do, is make sure we were keeping each other in check with all those items. The core team was also responsible for creating breakout meetings to work on process changes. So as we were presenting parts of BIM 360 that were new to the organization, right, like a submittals module, much different process than we've done before, they were then responsible for pulling in additional staff from their business units to, one, validate the process change, and two, have valuable input and buy-in on that process change, because that's very large in terms of enterprise scalability of something. Is while you might not be able to take everybody's concerns in place, because we all will have to change something that we're used to doing, at least giving them a little bit of a preview in advance it did go a long way. And then we also had a heavy marketing involvement. So we brought our marketing department in very early to help us be champions of this change process and what is going to happen. We put together a very aggressive communications plan. The closer we got to that January 1st rollout, the more communications that went out, but we were on a monthly cadence prior to that, and then up to bi-weekly and then a weekly cadence right before launch to define why we were doing this, how we were doing this, and when we were doing this. Next slide, please. So one of the guiding principles when we talked with the core team was, how are we going to transform our process maturity? And we had to take a hard, deep look. I mean, as technologically savvy as we were in that digital process map that was presented by Lauren earlier in 2018, we felt as an organization we were further along this. But the hard reality is this is a tool that Autodesk uses. Their consulting team brought this to us. We really were only at level 0 as an organization. We have a lot of great tools that we do use. We've executed projects, at a very high level with those tools, but we really only converted the analog processes into a digital format. They were still within their own systems. They weren't connected yet. And that's the big difference between 0 and 1. And the scale here is going from digitize to digitalize, is you're really connecting teams, data, processes, and they're unified by shared workflows in a CD or a common data environment. And that's where we didn't have it all in place. As that process map showed, we had stuff everywhere. There wasn't a common data environment other than it all fell within SSOE's organization, and that is not a common data environment. So really, we had a lot of work to go to be able to do this. So we went through this kind of exercise to figure out where we were as an organization and where we wanted to go. And not everything that's on this, when you start going into the micro level of workflow and process improvement, will get all the way to the prediction or level 5 state, right? Some processes you only need to get them to level 1. Which everything's in a common data environment. And then after that, maybe you don't have to standardize because it's very client oriented or it's very business or market sector oriented. So it's not standardized at an enterprise, right? A company-wide template, right? So again, we had to get the team up to this. Remember, these individuals that are on the core team, they have a business to run. Their project management and their engineers and architects. This isn't their main workflow is to think about how we transform digitally across our organization. So have to spend a lot of time really kind of level setting and getting that team brought up to, this is where we're trying to go. Next slide, please. So we went through a planning process, and there's a lot of information in here, but we'll kind of talk through it across the x-axis and the y-axis first. So we went through a planning process with this core team, and each of these little squares that you see with words inside of them, they're a Post-it note that we did in person, where we had people put the Post-it notes across the x-axis, which is the importance to the organization. So low is along the left side, and the higher the importance along the right. So a lot of discussion, right? A lot of individuals there, different parts of the process that they own. This is something that takes a few hours to go through. It's first getting all these sticky notes out there. What are your pain points? in the organization, and then all agreeing on which one has higher importance. Once you get to the ranking that no post-it note can have the same level of importance across the x-axis, then you start the difficulty or the y-axis planning process. So again, low towards the bottom, high towards the top. The team has to go through and reset all of those post-it notes in terms of difficulty. When you look at enterprise scalability, how difficult is it to organize some of these post-it notes and make it broad and wide, right? Not just specific to a client or a project, but across the entire organization. So once you overlay these posties in terms of importance and difficulty, it scatters across this entire thing. And then you actually break it up by quadrants, which you can see here. This is the final process here. So in the quadrants, the right hand, lower right hand, you see high ROI. That is where you focus as a result of this exercise, the majority of your phase one, and that's what we have as P1 activity. In the upper right hand is your strategic, right? These are longer term initiatives. You look at those as maybe phase 2, phase 3. Those post-it notes that fall in there, it's not saying they don't get done, but we only have explicit amount of time and resources available to us. So we have to focus on that high ROI. That's the biggest bang for your buck, is where we need to focus. And the strategic goes into that strategic roadmap that Lauren had mentioned. On the left-hand side, in the lower left, you have low-hanging fruit, or LHF. Those are things that you could give to somebody that maybe has a little bit of capacity in their spare time to maybe start to take a look at it, research it, get some more information. They're easy to pick off. They maybe don't have quite the importance across the broader organization, but they maybe do have some impacts on a smaller micro level at maybe just a single project, or maybe it's a client portfolio. And then the upper left is what we call luxurious. These are things, not saying again they don't get done, but you put them way out in the roadmap, because this team is the A team across the organization. They all agreed that QA QC reviews, that was one sticky note that really was like, while it may sound high or odd to put that in the luxurious, all the other things, if you figured them out, that almost will solve itself anyways. So don't focus on that one in particular, because the other ones will solve that particular sticky. So that's why it does show up there. Next slide. So again, here's a zoom up of the high ROI, and this is what was really the driving factors for that BIM 360 rollout in January 1st, 2021. So first is document management. It's in the bottom right-hand corner. And then we would have to build our cloud model authoring capabilities to build better coordination amongst ourselves as well as external players. We needed to have better issue management. And then we were looking at progress photos, whether it was early on in the project as well as you were doing construction. How do we do a better job of filing those as well as tracking closure? We need a better RFI process, submittal process, and then the transmittal, even though it wasn't in the P1 arc, we did find that the processing, we had to pull that down into this corner. So next slide, please. On top of that is contracts. While this isn't something that is typically discussed in this type of forum, you do have to plan 6 to 12 months for this process. We currently are under an enterprise business agreement. We're on our third one with Autodesk, so we're in year 8 of 9. Actually, but prior to this rollout, we were negotiating our next enterprise business agreement. And at that point, we knew we were going to be selecting BIM 360 as our platform, but we had to kind of project our token growth and how we were going to be using these platforms and tools. So, when you're planning this, you also do have to plan into your contract negotiations when you're going to be incorporating tools like this and what type of financial changes that might have or impacts that has to your organization. Don't focus too much on the additional services like a takeoff, assemble, a pipe, unless you know that's a main platform. Back to that planning process we just went through. Everything you showed there was all under the build or the BIM 360 Docs platform. So anything additional service, we didn't make it a science project. We said, okay, we'll put a little extra on there, a very small percentage, but nothing big, because it's not going to scale right away, because that's not our focus over the next 18 to 24 months. So make sure it just slow growth, that non-core modules. And then lastly, since we're all technologists at heart, negotiating contracts isn't necessarily all of our strong suits. Some of us might have that experience, but bring in your procurement department, bring in those individuals that are great at negotiating it. It may not be their core responsibility to understand the details, but they do understand the contract negotiation side. So make sure to bring them in for the contracts. Next slide, and then I'm going to hand it back over to Lauren to talk a little bit more about our platform map.
So here's a little bit deeper dive into our digital platform map. Very similar to the circular diagram. You're going to see some overlapping technologies. This is a little bit deeper dive into some of those technologies. As Mark alluded to, as we were creating our strategy and looking to go from analog to digital, going from just digitizing our processes to really evaluating our infrastructure. I grayed out, some of the other items, because today's presentation really is around our Autodesk Construction Cloud journey. But what I really wanted to demonstrate here in this graphic is, in order to really be successful with our BIM 360 Autodesk Construction Cloud launch, we did have to invest in an SSOE cloud environment. We did build our data lake on top of Microsoft Azure. This data lake truly allows for us to have that data lifecycle integration and automation capability that the APIs and the Forge environment provides us to integrate and access and harvest inside of the Autodesk Construction Cloud. So this is really instrumental to stand up both of these systems, and they really did stand up in conjunction and congruent with each other. So when we launched BIM 360, January 1st, 2021, right after the holidays, people were coming back. We had already gone through a large communication cycle. We had already initiated some training, but we knew we couldn't launch every BIM 360 module to the whole organization. One, as much as Mark and I personally wanted to, there were so many great features in every single one of these modules. We could just execute our projects, so much more efficient and have all this rich data. It is a lot to ask of anybody, an architect, an engineer, a designer, to not only, hey, on your new project, you're going to go to a whole new place to open your Revit file, to review your PDFs, to update your estimates in Excel. We're not only changing the place you're going, but we're changing the pics and clips of how you author those documents, those models. So we really focused on some key items. We went into those high priority areas. We wanted that common data environment, and it started with docs management, focusing on the design authoring and the cloud workshare for both Revit, AutoCAD, and Civil 3D, getting into design issue tracking on the project management side, diving into the submittals and RFIs, introducing insights and just the out of the box insight dashboarding. We did quickly realize that it didn't quite scale the way we wanted. It was a great quick view that was accessible to all project members, but we knew we had to do more with that data. And luckily, the APIs and the harvesting allowed us to connect to that data more efficiently. But after that January 1st launch, we also knew that there's this whole other set of tools that we'd already been piloting and incubating these features. Design collaboration was really critical to our design review process. And so we started to work with those breakout groups that Mark talked about, started building the processes after the initial launch to define SSOE's means and methods of utilizing design collaboration, model collaboration, asset tracking, cost management, checklists. And, right after launch, Autodesk Construction Cloud was already being released. So not only were we starting to introduce these new modules with the core modules, we were also starting to incubate the new ACC platform and derive that plan of when was the right time for us to look at that. But let's talk about the training and communication piece. This is probably the most resource intensive piece that you will go through. This is also the piece that you will have the most casualties on your project. It does not start and stop with an email or an intranet blast or a video series or taking an online course. You really have to invest in this process. It took several individuals not only to create the content, to deliver the content, to have the follow-up meetings, to balance the support staff. We had one or two main leads. We had a marketing person attached to those leads. At the same time, we had to build up a support system, a help desk system, a tier 0 and a tier 1 system that, as the core team was focusing on the launch and the process definition and the project setup and the feature requests and integrating with Autodesk, we had to have a nice foundational support system. We executed a tier 1 BIM 360 ACC SharePoint page that really has a plethora of digital content for training, write-ups, white papers, videos, hyperlinks to Autodesk training. We also build up our tier 1 and tier 2 help desk support staff so that if somebody was having an issue, why can't I see this folder? We had knowledge-based articles that said, let's go look at permissions. Typically, when you can't see something, it's a permissions issue. And maintaining that tier 0 content, as we had to revise some of our processes and procedures, that was pretty important too. We didn't always get everything right pre-launch, as much as we thought we had everything perfect. When people start using the system, and let me tell you, they don't start using the system on January 1, but by February 1, people were in there and they were asking the right questions, and things were having hiccups, and we had to be able to respond very, very quickly because we weren't going to go back. Those legacy systems didn't support our vision, and we had to support the enterprise in this journey. So BIM 360, January 1st, 2021, one of the most critical things that we had set up on launch was our project startup automation. This is a screenshot of our project startup view. This was taken a couple days ago. As you can see, there was just over 2,300 active automations. So what does an automation do? At a certain point in our ERP system, when a project becomes, or when an opportunity is ready for launch, the automation takes a couple things. It takes the end client and the short project description. It takes the location, the building or office type. It takes the default owners out of our ERP. That would be our principal, our project manager, and our BIM manager, as well as a project assistant. Automatically assigns them to our project document, or the project document. It pulls our SSOE standard template and folder structure from BIM 360, now ACC. And at the same time, it mirrors and creates an Office 365 group that maintains all of our email correspondence. And this, on average, takes less than 5 minutes from the time the administrator pushes the button in the ERP. Typically in less than 5 minutes, the project is set up, docs is executed, the 3 to 4 project admins are applied, the Microsoft group is created, and the links are sent out for them to finish the setup of their project. Having this automation created and ready to go at launch essentially saved SSOE the equivalent of 1.5 full-time employees in 1 year. And this really was the level setting and benchmark to being successful at an enterprise level.
So expectations. A lot of time was spent, again, discussing the history and where we got in the planning stages. When it comes to a major enterprise rollout, it's different than when you're doing a small, let's call it pilot project, where you're getting feedback right away. The major enterprise rollout is your plan is just humming along like that bicyclist on the left-hand side. It's pretty slow incline. There's no traps on the way. And the reality is, because again, we were doing all new projects in the system, we weren't cutting over existing projects yet from the old system. So really just giving time for that automation to spin up projects, right? We're doing some proposal activity, some really lightweight work. We're not getting into the design cycle yet. A lot of people, a lot of different handoffs, right? So those first 30 days, things just hum along pretty simple. But the next 18 months, as shown on the right-hand side, that's where it really does start to churn through and choose up the plan that even the best laid plan with the A team in place and all the communication and marketing, there are still holes that until you put your plan into action, you'll never find them. And some of those pitfalls and poles were desktop connector. Some of it was we just didn't stress test maybe how a particular part worked because they were so nuanced in the details, and it was missed by the core team. But there are a lot of peaks and valleys in different modes of transportation when it comes to the reality of executing this plan over the next 18 months. It is a very inspiring time, tumultuous time, stressful time for a lot of employees. But the reality around anything when it comes to enterprise, and for it to really click through, and the reason I wanted to show it this way is it takes the average employee 18 months from the time that the change is influenced to the point of acceptance and utilization in the way that you intended. So a major change, I'm not talking a minor change, a major change like an enterprise rip out of an old system and going completely cloud to an unused system by these teams before, really does take somewhere between 18 months, maybe 24 months, depending on the organization's kind of tax and plan. So really wanted to put some highlighted visuals, very plain English, that it's not easy. Just because we had a great plan doesn't mean it went well. There was a lot of bumps. So next slide, please, to talk about a few of those. Sorry, not those yet, but again, talking about the project access request. One of the bumps of the old way of working was everybody had access to everything unless there was a confidentiality agreement required by the client. So in the Windows Server environment, in the other document management systems, it really was controlled that any user from the organization can come in and see all projects. So if you were assigned to work on a project, you had instant access. You didn't have to talk to anybody. Significant mind shift change between a cloud hosted platform and an old legacy system like that, because cloud hosted platforms are very restrictive by design, right? To meet those very strict security compliance requests. So as Lauren had mentioned earlier, we had to create this system, this back-end automation system that not only spun up the projects, but also really is the Google of projects for our organization. You can search it by many different criteria: client name, project number. It'll find it based on very, very short character search, 3 character minimum. So as long as you know a little bit about the project, you can find it. And as on the middle image on the right-hand side shows, if you don't have access to that project, you can then click on it and request access. So what this gives the person the ability to do is, it's not like the old system completely where they have access right away, but they can still find all the project data. When somebody's told or reassigned to work on a new project and become productive right away, they have the ability to search and find the project, request access to the project. And as shown here, the wait time, generally speaking, is less than 15 minutes on most projects, because it'll send an email to all the project administrators at SSOE on said project. In the criteria for project administration in this enterprise world of BIM 360 ACC is, if you're a project manager, you're a project management assistant or an assistant project manager. Those are 2 different titles at SSOE. A project controller or a BIM manager, you get the ability to have full administrative rights on that project. And generally speaking, most projects have 4 to 5 people with those, that myriad of titles that would be getting that automated email. And we built that training and that rigor into those individuals that as soon as you see that, apply, that response and add that user. And it's been well oiled. Again, the first couple of months, we had a lot of over the shoulder support on that. After the fact, it's again, pretty instantaneous for most people, even throughout all hours of the day, because we have people working at all hours in all different regions. Next slide, please. So the focus of the rollout, again, if we go back to that planning slide, or remember that lower right-hand quadrant, right? We were talking about document management and quality issues. So the focus of the rollout really was how our folder structure, how we had to migrate that into more of a data-centric mindset as opposed to just a bunch of folders with names on it that mirrored a process and how we did something. But we also want to make sure that we were scaling accessibility. And this took a couple iterations through the early parts of, let's say, 2021 to learn how to make this more streamlined and, again, built into the automation. So some highlights around folder structure is, if you're an SSOE employee, which is in the far right, you have the folder structure you see as an image, and then you see the permissions on the right-hand side. If you're an SSOE employee, the company is how we apply folder permissions. So you have the ability to edit, and that's built into our automation, because in ACC, you can't use a company as a permission type. You can use roles, but not a company. So again, SSOE employees have full access to be able to edit within the folder structure for their particular project. External. So let's say this is an external subconsultant, a vendor, a general contractor. We basically have it, as you can see, as external blank. There's 4 main roles that we have at SSOE. And again, in that permission set, not this particular folder that we have selected, because we're looking at the O2 client folder. But if we were looking at, let's say, the O3 subconsultant folder, by default, those roles, not companies, we use roles for external, because then we can grant that and we don't have to worry about managing companies from the data integrity standpoint. It becomes quite the ask for the project managers to coordinate, get the company in there, especially when somebody's pulling files maybe for one time. So again, we found this through maturity that the external roles suit everything we need for data compliance and permissions compliance, and not having the companies in there. We still would like companies at an account administration process, because it does help us tie things together. But again, at a base level, to get projects up and running, we put those roles in there. And again, the default template has those external in there. And then client is an owner for the roles. That's a standard role. And you can see in that permissions, again, we're looking at the client folder. We have it selected. They have the ability to edit in that folder. If we selected another folder in the tree, like the O1 SSOE folder, they don't even have the ability to see the folder. So again, in our template, we've controlled this very specifically. It makes it, again, easier for BROS for mass adoption, as well as collaboration. That was one of the key checkpoints, is we want to be able to collaborate internally as well as externally faster and better. And we've built that into our folder structure. We've taken a completely different focus as well as project management, right? The project managers now have full control of their project's destiny. Before, the folder structure was very, very regimented, and it still is, but they have the ability, if they need to add a subfolder for subconsultants, they can do it. They have the ability to control their permissions better and their workflows. And that, again, helps it customize it based on their project delivery, their contract methodology, whom else they might have coming in. One thing that I will say as a caveat, this takes a lot of unplanned time to coach. Even the plan is, this is a great thing. A lot of your specialist roles, like those like Lauren and myself and others in our team, do have to have a lot of over the shoulder. This isn't something you really can control through training, because you have to have a lot of fluid discussion back and forth. And the other focus on the rollout is like desktop connector. And the bullet point we'll just stick with here is, it's like no other system that's ever been used. And we can all agree on that. It is completely different. And I will go to the next slide to discuss that in detail. So some lessons learned. Again, desktop connector is like nothing we've ever used. It doesn't lock files automatically. There's latency issues depending on what your internet connection is. And that goes with any cloud platform. It's not just a desktop connector, but you have to think about that, is most people are used to on-premise solutions when it comes to enterprise level. They use maybe OneDrive and other solutions here and there, but it's not their day-to-day performance. So you have to build in that expectation around there is going to be some things that are a little bit slower, and there will be a lot of frustration around that. And that's just part of that process Lauren mentioned earlier, that it will burn people out. Also, better just discussions around web interface over desktop connector. When do you use it? Obviously, the data side of it, you have to go to the web interface, and that's very valuable. But if you're a day-to-day engineer, designer, architect, and you're really just working on spreadsheets and calcs, desktop connector is kind of your go-to. And it's really hard to do that, which one's better, because that's what everybody always looks for. Why do I go to this one over this one? And it's just, again, casual discussions. It's hard to frame that up in training because everybody has a preference depending on where you are in your career. Some of the younger generation, they prefer a web experience. I've been in this industry for 20 years. I do like that Windows standard environment, but I do like the web one as well. So it really is tough to just say use one over the other. It is a personal preference. Migration of old projects, right? We still have this legacy system out there. People are still executing projects in January 1st, 2021, and they're being asked to use the new system, which is completely different. So there is confusion, and there's just no way around it. It's just learning. That's how we have to do it, is by learning. So the training's good, but people will just go back and try to force the old technology methods in the new tools. And you just have to help the teams as they regress. Our Autodesk training is good. It was very nice. And it's gotten a lot better since January 1st, 2021. There's a lot of great learning examples out there and videos. It's gotten so good. But our custom workflows, you still need to make sure and put those out there as a company. And it's still sitting over the shoulder and coaching individuals. So you have to build that mentorship as part of your planning process, get that core team up to speed quick. They act as your mentors, and they're the ones doing the over the shoulder, so you're not burdening your staff. Again, permissions. We learned a lot. We applied it into that last slide to really simplify it. It's just one of those things. You're not going to get it perfect at the first go. Just have a very iterative approach. And again, we need to have a full-time team to just lead and support to minimize the staff burnout. And you also have to have that help desk team built out that is not the same as this full-time team, because they can't help the day-to-day basic issues as well as help build the vision and execute the plan. So that does have to be split up. And lastly is leadership buy-in and support across all levels. We had executive management leadership. We had the SBU, or the strategic business unit leadership. We had division manager leadership bought into the process. The fourth level deep is where it didn't quite get dissipated unanimously. They all had differing, let's say, opinions. And again, it's just a large organization. You're going to see that, right? The other groups were a little bit smaller, easier to maintain the message and the why. But as you get into the organization, it was a little bit harder to get that buy-in and support. So it's just one of those things you constantly have to work at through your communication cycle. Next slide, please. So where were we? Very quickly, this is a touch point on the previous slide that we showed. So pre-2021, we had everything in our technology stack. We were at level 0, the digitize. Once we got into PY21, we started in that digitalize process, right? We weren't complete just because we got to January 2021. It's an iterative process. As projects are put into the system, we're now getting in that digitalized fashion. Now we need to start looking at how do we standardize across the organization, right? We built our foundation, which is BIM 360. All project data is there. That doesn't mean we're using all the tools yet, but all the data is there and we're starting to use the tools. So the next phase of the project, for what we're calling the ACC rollout, is how do we use the design collaboration and coordination tools, sheets, photos, field issue trackings, and really using RFI and submittals as part of that rollout. So now we're focusing on that next level of the standardization, right? Of here's how we work on every project across our organization. So next slide. Just some numbers to kind of substantiate where we were. So at the beginning of the year, anything in light blue that you see on this slide is our BIM 360 projects that were started up with our automation. So again, new projects only. And then the dark blue is our ACC projects. So you can see in the early, let's say, the first quarter of SSOE in this calendar year, still obviously in our BIM 360, all new projects. But you can see as we progressed from January through May, we started spinning up more and more ACC projects as we were going through the stress testing validation pilot phase. And we really started to hit a linchpin in April, where even though we weren't live yet on all new projects, we were sequestering Any major projects with long-term contracts, we're going to start putting them into the ACC ecosystem. Any of our standards where we host client-specific standards, whether it's specifications, master models, drawings, etc., we were putting those into the ACC system because there was other functionalities that we saw coming in the pipeline. So that's why there's such a huge number there. And then you can see, of course, May 31 is when we declared all new projects go in. So you see June, July, and August. It's all dark blue, all ACC, no more BIM 360 for new projects. We still have those BIM 360 projects out there, right? Those are existing projects. People are working, we're delivering them, but nothing new is going into the system anymore. So you can see that cut over very quickly happened as soon as we hit that date. Next slide, please. So, okay, the ACC launch, we're going to hit some of these points pretty quickly, but this is where we go enterprise-wide. Again, May 31st, 2022, we've already cut the cord 18 months into the system of our new ER or project delivery system, BIM 360. We've already said no more BIM 360. We are only in the ACC product line. Next slide. So the first thing that we've learned is the license administration. So again, SSOE is an enterprise customer. We have an enterprise business agreement. Starting in April of 2022, all new external users automatically get an unlimited build license. Now for us as a BIM 360 shop, that just happened no matter what. That was part of the system, but it didn't happen in ACC until April of 2022. So that is a caveat. If you had those pilot projects like we did in the system prior to that, you have to manually assign external users to have build. An additional caveat that we found is if they are added to the hub after April 1st, 2022, but they're added to a BIM 360 project first, because remember, we're still supporting both tools, then added to an ACC project, you still have to go back in and manually add them. So I just want to list that as a caveat to those that are enterprise customers such as us, to go back and you still have some manual cleanup with licensing. Another caveat, this isn't really a burn point for us as SSOE, but an interesting one is once the license is assigned to that external user, it travels outside the hub. So they can go work on it and they have a license to work on somebody else's project outside of your hub. I look at that as not a big deal to me. It's lost revenue to Autodesk. Poor planning on their side. Last point is internal users at SSOE, we get access to all unlimited because again, we're enterprise customer and the way we negotiated our contract, going back to that contract negotiation slide earlier. So as soon as they become an SSOE employee, they get unlimited plan. They have availability to use the design tools. There's no restrictions in place. So that's just how we've set it up because we want access. We want people to be able to work right away. And again, use that project search to be added to projects as soon as they're ready to be working. Next slide, please. So field enhancements. This is one of the major reasons we started looking at cutting from BIM 360 to ACC early on. We had a group of individual projects and an acquisition of SSOEs that was really savvy on the plan grid side. And one of the parts of ACC is they added the plan grid functionalities, features, and simplicity and elegance to the ACC ecosystem. So this was really a very early driver of being able to go into the field, find information, locate it, and give it context super efficiently and quickly, where every one of these dots that you see on this particular plan is really kind of just a due diligence or just a field survey of the conditions. And each dot is based on a discipline, and each dot has a photo assigned to it and potentially, a work order. And that's just for us to be able to contextualize as we're working on scoping up a project and doing the design side of it. We have this plan that's set up using sheets with all of these issues assigned to it, where those photos are to give it full context. And again, this was a very easy win. It really helped the team functionally use something that was kind of clunky and hard to use in the field platform of BIM 360. So again, very early win in a driver to why we went to ACC very quickly. Next slide, please. Photos enhancements, again, building off of the issues, is there's a new module called Photos. You have the ability to start auto tagging, right? They have an artificial intelligence engine. Is it perfect? No, but it does scrape very nicely the objects. It also has a 360-degree spherical image viewer. which the standard, if you put photos into a folder, does not have the ability to do. Again, it has GPS tracking. So if you have GPS on your device, whether it's a smartphone or if you do have a digital camera with that ability, you can share it and it already shows where it is in the building or on the site, on the exterior. Again, it's all about context. It's all about really helping people find. We've traditionally, in many companies, have dumped bunches of folders and named that folder based on a date those photos were taken and approximately where. This just makes it so much easier to consume where information is and how it might help in the design process. So this photos enhancement, again, another big win and why we went to ACC. Next, please. Project quality enhancements. These ones are the submittals is what we're looking at here. The submittals workflow in BIM 360 was a little bit clunky. There was a lot of different tabs within a card. This process was just a lot easier for the teams to administer, set up. Still some challenges around the templating, but that is a process improvement that we can gain from this. But the ability to just, in this particular slide, you can see, have really your submittals log in front of you without creating the log. And then on the next slide, when we click on it to look at a particular submittal, go ahead and hit next slide. There we go. You can see all of the information right away. Attachments, who's got ball in court, who's working on it, watching it, and everything else. And this was, again, a huge win because the submittals process in BIM 360 was a big change for the organization. And that tool was very, very kind of clunky in BIM 360. We can all agree it served its purpose. It digitized a process, but it was hard to go through the steps. Where here, it's very easy to figure out who has action and what, if it's completed, in this case it is, what's the official response and what attachments went out as part of that. Next slide, please. And also a quality enhancement that we're looking at is meetings. This isn't necessarily enterprise scaled yet, but some project managers are starting to adopt it. And it is a very simplified tool. Again, getting away from, you had some people using Microsoft Word with a file that's in a folder structure documenting meeting notes, other teams using OneDrive, or say not OneDrive, but OneNote. And it just started to connect all that disparity and the ability to run meetings efficiently, as well as track resolution. And that's what a lot of the project managers that are using this are starting to find. Again, there's adoption cycle around this. It is different. It has its nuance that many of us aren't used to. But again, it's a very efficient and a good win compared to the BIM 360 meeting tools. Next slide, please. Two more really beneficial on the modeling and collaboration tools. In design collaboration and model coordination really didn't get much upgrade. But again, with Lauren's previous slide, when we talked about modules, that wasn't really the focus of BIM 360. And when we did change from BIM 360 to ACC, there was kind of a breath of fresh air where BIM 360 did take a lot of shots in terms of negative pushback from operations teams and just all the changes that when we went to ACC, it just was welcome because the interface change was a lot cleaner. It was a lot more efficient, and it was a lot easier to find. Like on the right-hand side, being able to link a 2D document using hypermodeling to a 3D model. That really, we didn't do design collaboration on the left-hand side and model coordination much in BIM 360. But again, we started testing it and really putting it out there as a standard process across the organization in ACC. So again, it didn't change a lot. That wasn't the driver, but it was, again, getting around that maturity of BIM 360 kind of had a dark cloud over it because of some of the inefficiencies and the screens were click heavy, and ACC was just a lot cleaner and more efficient. And that's, again, why we focused on, we're going to drive this a lot faster than the previous plan of adoption to get to BIM 360. So next slide. And again, one of the last pieces that really drove it in is the bridge functionality. And this is huge because you have the ability to, for us, we have client standards, so specification, design criteria, calculations, etc. Backgrounds, CAD backgrounds for sites, master models. We have the ability to work on that stuff at a master level and then use the bridge functionality, either copy it on a real-time basis as soon as it's updated, or a one-time push to SSOE projects. Also, it saves us a lot of time because we have the ability to push data from the SSOE hub. You know, we're working on projects in our hub, and many clients or partners now have ACC hubs of their own. and we don't have to download data, create a transmittal, all these other things that, again, adds time. We have the ability to now bridge it in real time, again, if we want to, as soon as the file's updated, or one-time pushes to those outside places. So we are using this bridge function on projects, on production projects with our clients, and it is a very big driver of why we went to ACC as early as we did, because we saw the writing on the wall working with Autodesk. They were telling us about this feature, and we knew if we got our projects in early, those projects, once they got into that design cycle later on in this year, the summer and the fall, we'd be able to use Bridge and start really streamlining some of that data handover process. Next slide, please.
So Mark has just really done a great deep dive into the work that we did with BIM 360, you know, the lessons learned of an enterprise launch, jumping into ACC relatively quickly after the product was released, and we had just, you know, switched the whole enterprise. And all in parallel with all of that work, SSOE was also investing in our custom data visualizations and automation. In order to achieve our 2025 vision, we really had to continue to make data visible and accessible across all of our systems. One of the main reasons to invest in collaboration platforms, cloud applications with accessible and open APIs, is having the ability to enhance the end user experience. SSOE is a design and architecture engineering firm. We don't have the luxury of working on one project for 18 months. We work on multiple projects for multiple clients every week, every day. We're touching many, many things. And so with the ACC launch, we enhanced our project and access search. So not only were we able to dive deeper into the search experience, utilizing our API harvesting capabilities for both our ERP and ACC. We also created the weekly summary review inside of our Cardinal Lake. This is a nice concatenated view that simplifies all your open items across projects. It has the status, it has the owner, it has the type. You can filter things on and off. You know what is on your plate that day across your project so you can prioritize your work. Again, this was just part of adding to that efficiency, investing in the platform, investing in SSOE's employees, and making the data readily available. The other key automation, and this came both because of the open enhanced Revit API that came with Revit 22 and 23, our Forge, our custom Forge applications, as well as the ACC APIs. We are able to now streamline our Revit model automation. When our project administrators have the ability through our Cardinal environment, they are able to click our Revit project creator. They're able to choose from the appropriate SSOE or owner templates stored inside of the proper Revit templates ACC project. Again, we have a project that's committed to those standards. The administrator can pick which discipline templates, how many of those discipline templates that they need, the naming convention, as well as the project information parameters that they want filled out. We're also pulling from our ERP system to auto-populate project number, project name, location, address. And then not only does this automation create the files, it links the templates together, it publishes for a cloud work share, and it's just in time ready inside of our standard document location. It also initiates our design collaboration process as well. If you talk to one of our model managers, this is something that used to take on average anywhere from 4 to 8 hours, depending on the complexity of the project. When done properly, it's down to 4 minutes. So again, providing, the infrastructure changes we're making and the investment in the technology allows us, and the standardization that Mark talked about in the digital transformation pipeline, allows us to do automations just like this. So what are those must-haves in order to successfully scale an enterprise launch? I'm not going to read every single one of these. I wanted this presentation to end with a couple of condensed slides so that you can go back to your companies, to your leadership, and talk about, these are the things that we need to make sure that we have. I want to emphasize building the why and the purpose, incubate early, invest in those resources and teams. The communication piece cannot be underestimated. And that is both internal and external training and marketing campaigns. Because there's a huge opportunity. Some of the biggest successes we have is working with our owners, not only in our ACC journey, but in their Autodesk Construction Cloud journey as well, and being partners with them and Autodesk along the way to be successful in this. And how do we sustain this? Once you launch something, especially with the collaboration platforms in the cloud environment, there's a new feature coming out 2 weeks later, a month later, 6 months later. How do we create a culture of change that will receive these new features and not have that change fatigue? Well, that starts with having the communities of practice, the lean mentality of continuous improvement, and constantly incubating and piloting these new features and finding the right time to roll them out for your organization. So the future, our ACC Phase 3, we have not stopped. This is really kind of our list right now. This is we're going into our performance year 23, starting in the fall for SSOE Group. We're going to continue to look at the ACC features and enhancements. We are going to celebrate desktop connector improvements, issues, photos, forms, assets, schedule, meeting minutes, the correspondence beta, the AutoSpec beta. We will continue to invest in our integrations with Bridge, SSOE's Forge app, third-party applications like Syn2, our data lake. And all of those things are going to continue to enhance our dashboarding at an enterprise level, at a market portfolio level, client, project, and user. And really this kind of culminates that data vision of having this life cycle of project information readily available and accessible at the enterprise level, that every project member, every employee, every executive, can not only innovate with ACC, but actively engage our clients and our colleagues. And thank you for listening to Mark and I today, and we look forward to talking with all of you soon.